Hey BookTube, it's Jay here. I decided in honor of completely butchering poor Shawn the Maniac's 112 page tag last video. I'm just hijacking that to discuss discuss less. That this time I would actually just do a proper 112 tag. Not blind for myself, because I find doing this alone, I always know the book. I've got the author here. I've got the title of the thing here. There's just no way. I'm just gonna have to just do it myself. But you at home won't know what it is. So that's the drama. And I'll try very hard to actually give you my thoughts on each page after I've read it, versus rushing headlong through and making this not that interesting of an exercise. So yes, here's the first selection of page 112. Let's read the page. I'll give you my thoughts. You can think about your thoughts, and then at the very end of the video, I'll share the titles with you and give you my overall kind of ranking of which one I would read first, or which one I would get rid of, or, you know, just general stuff like that. So yes, here's the first one. And in return, each gave her total trust. When she rode them at the high fence, the fence one could not see over. With no knowledge at all of what might be beyond, each one trusted that she would bring them safely down on the other side. They knew it as trust. She would not betray them, not one of them. Not that they thought in words. They did not have words. It was more an understanding of the way things were, the rewards, the threats, the things out there on the ridge that day. This noise moving in the night, this noise that tried to crawl into ears, into heads, to take over everything. These were threats. But there was something else abroad in the night, and that was something they could not identify as either a threat or a reward. It fought against the horrid noise. It kept the insinuating thoughts away. And yet it came no closer. It offered no hay. It stroked no necks. It was simply there, like a breathing wall, a thing they did not understand at all. So the wicker ran, left to right, then back again, here, all right, still alive, nothing yet. And then we have a space, new scene. Jandra Jellicoe did not see she had threatened, and went over to the Jandra Jellicoe Jandra Jellicoe did as she had threatened, and went over to the port side in her half-person to visit Ducky Johns. She met Ducky before and quite liked her, despite the business she was in, which Jandra didn't altogether approve of. Pleasure was pleasure, had been for ages, and people would seek it out. Some of the ways they sought it, though, in Jandra's opinion, were not quite tasteful. Still, she made nothing of that as she sat in Ducky John's private parlor, sipping tea and staring at the girl who sat on the carpet, humming to herself, whatever. When the girl got an itch, up came the skirt and the hand scratched, wherever the itch might be. No inhibitions at all, no more than a cat licking itself where it needed it. My, Jandra said. You can't keep her here, Ducky. Well, who wanted to? Ducky sulked, waving her tiny hands in circles to express innocent annoyance. It was Jelly, your own Jelly, made me bring her back here. She's useless to me, dear. Can't sell her. Who'd want her? Needs to be trained before she's any use at all. Does she potty? Jandra wanted to know. And that's the end of that page. So it's interesting having followed in between two scenes, because the first scene, I feel like I'm in it's horses. I'm in the kind of the head of a horse. There's this kind of a stream of consciousness. There's kind of like a lot of repetition of like trust, and then they thought in words, they did not have the words, the rewards, the threats. It seems very kind of like an animal perspective in a way, and it's like the fence. It's like caged animals and something like that. And so the wicker ran left to right, then back again. I don't know, wicker actually is, I think of a horse wickering or something like that. So yeah, it's interesting, just getting a thing seen out of context. The other one, it's funny, it's very much it sounds like we're in like, it's like a brothel or something like that. People get their pleasure, but it's not very tasteful. But it's really icky because you get this whole thing of, the girl who sat on the carpet humming to herself, and she basically is itching her, pulling up her skirt and itching her crotch, and isn't, I mean, at the end it's talking about being potty trained, which is definitely really, really gross. It's like this is like an infant being, and we're talking about prostitution. So it's interesting. You get kind of untrammeled nature, and then you get this kind of really gross scene in that. So it's definitely engaging. Definitely two strong scenes. It's actually quite cool to get lucky enough that page 112 happened to fall on that. So yeah, that's the first one. So let's go on to number 2, which I'll try not to hold up and show the camera. Okay. A knock at the door. Quickly, the spy screen. Quickly, okay. A knock at the door. Quickly sliding the spy screen away in the secret door of his desk, Normandy rapped out an official order to enter. Froding stepped in, closing the door behind him. Suddenly a tremble, Normandy clutched his throat. Good Dempsey! You're not really there. Froding, you're just a paranoid delusion. I must get away a few days. I must get away for a few days' rest. I know that you're really down in your room watching Utrecht, sitting comfortably in your chair. Swelling 2 inches all around, Froding stamped his foot. I will not be referred to as a paranoid delusion, controller. That is a dummy sitting in my chair. It has taken over and will not leave when asked. So I have wrung from you a confession that you spy on your staff. You have not heard the end of this by any means, nor even the beginning. Let's be reasonable, Froding. Have a calmer with me. Hurriedly, Normandy went to a secret cupboard and brought out pills and a jug of chlorinated water. We are reasonable men. Let us discuss the situation reasonably. It boils down to the old question of what is reality, does it not? As I see it, improved means of communication have paradoxically taken mankind further from reality. We are all so near each other that we seek to keep apart by interposing electronic circuits between us. Only psychic messages get through, but those we still prefer not to recognize officially. Can I believe anything I see Utrecht doing when he is removed from me by so many scientific artistic systems? The trouble is our minds identify television, even at its best, with the phantasms of our inner vision. Wait, I must write a paper on the subject. He picked up a laser pen and scrawled a note on his writing screen. So contemporary history, which we experience through all these scientific artistic media, becomes as much a vehicle for fantasy as does past history, which comes filtered through the medium of past time. What's real, Froding? Tell me, what is real? Which, maybe it's a part of the betrayal of how, who I know the author is, because I'm not reading it blind, that you can hear me slipping into the British accent there, but the stuff like good Dempsey and of Normandy and him going, let's be reasonable, Froding. Have a calmer with me. It's very much, I get this kind of a British kind of thing coming from it. It does appeal to me in this very kind of like, okay, this is science fiction, but we're going to do it on a very kind of the surface. This is the subtext is the text level of we're going to talk about the ideas in this story right on the surface, which it's an older style science fiction, but that has its certain charm for me. I thought it's interesting. You get the stuff of like we as I see it, improved means of communication have paradoxically taken mankind further from reality. We are all so near each other that we seek to keep apart by interposing electronic circuits between us, which is very much science fiction talking about today, where I can communicate with you, but we are also quite apart from each other. And if you go any public place where we all have our phones in our faces and our things. So yeah, it's kind of fun. So that's number 2. It gets me on a less visceral level. It's much more kind of the fun, oh, this is science fiction level. For this final one, it's the very end of a chapter, which is nice. And I'm just going to cheat because it's a little bit of blank page here. I'm just going to get this little page here, last little line on the page 111 before it. He looked at the dim range of snowy mountains which Daily Alice made beside him. If he were a character, she had made him one. If he was a character, he was probably a minor character in someone else's story, this tall story he had gotten himself into. He would have his entrances and exits, contribute a line of dialogue now and then. Whether the character would be a crabby schoolmaster or something else didn't seem to matter much, and would be decided along the way. Well then, he examined himself carefully for feelings of resentment at this. He did feel a certain nostalgia for his vanished anonymity, for the infinite possibilities it contained, but he also felt her breathing next to him, and the house breathing around him, and in the rhythms with them, he fell asleep, nothing decided. While the moon smoothly shifted shadows from one side of Edgewood to the other, Daily Alice dreamed that she stood in a flower-starred field where on a hill there grew an oak tree and a thorn in deep embrace, their branches intertwining like fingers. Far down the hall, Sophie dreamed that there was a tiny door in her elbow, opened a crack, through which the wind blew, blowing on her heart. Dr. Drinkwater dreamed he sat before his typewriter and wrote this, quote, "There used to be an aged insect who lived in a hole in the ground. One June he puts on his summer straw and takes his pipe and his staff and his lamp in half his hands and follows the worm and the root to the stair that leads up to the door into the blue summer. This seems immensely significant to him, but when he awoke, he wouldn't be able to remember a word of it, try as he might. Mother beside him dreamed her husband wasn't in his study at all, but with her in the kitchen, where she drew tin cookie sheets endlessly out of the oven. The baked things on them were brown and round, and when he asked her what they were, she said, years. Which is like, it's kind of this wonderful kind of meta fairy tale kind of feel to it, where it's he's thinking, if he were a character, it was, she had made him one, but he was probably a minor one in the thing, and you wonder, it's like, it's this like minor character who is indeed thinking this lines. It's kind of notable from the second one, which was very much kind of wearing its science fiction on its sleeve. This one could be accused of kind of wearing its fantasy out in the open. Yet this one has a lot of kind of all these kind of very tangible, very concrete kind of sensory feel to it, which kind of really anchors it in a way that makes it much more kind of engaging. The thing of the house of her breathing next to him, of Daily Alice breathing next to him, and the house breathing around him, and with that rhythm I'm falling asleep, or just the idea of these cookies at the end, where baked things on them that were brown and round, and that but they're years. So it's interesting, kind of that combination of the two. It's interesting. You've got like Daily Alice, you've got Dr. Drinkwater. They're very much these. Dr. Drinkwater's sentence was really hard to read, so I don't know how much of a writer he is. What was it again? There is an aged insect who lives in a hole in the ground. One June he puts on his summer straw and takes his pipe and his staff and his lamp in half his hands, what the heck does that mean? And follows the worm and the root to the stair that leads up to the door into the blue summer. It's interesting. It's like all these connective things. It's like, and follows the worm and the root to the stair that leads up to the door into the blue summer. It's just like, I can see why I forgot it. doesn't get much to me, but I love that kind of, it's fantasy, and it's self-aware fantasy, but it's fantasy that's like very much, it's very much connected. I can feel it, which is what I look for in the fantasy. It's got to be fantasy that's rooted in something, If it's just like magic things shot out of his hands, and it's all just kind of like, you know, zap zap. Which is funny, it makes the science fiction one seem the less. So, in order of reading, let me tell you. I mean, okay, well, first, I guess, like, you know, which one appeals to you? I have a feeling actually that the third one actually probably appeals to me the most. Probably the third one or the first one. The first one had some really good. I like the animal and the ickiness. Those were two significant responses. Actually, there was more of the ickiness that was there. I'm going to go with the third one. Actually, I'm going to pick that for I think the one I would probably get to the first, and then the first one, the kind of the what felt like horse imagery, and then the icky kind of prostitution thing. And then, yeah, very third, I'll go for the kind of the science fiction, even though that was all right. That was all right. So yes, in order of reading, we have, first one read was Grass by Sherry Tepper, who is, yes, she's a well-known science fiction author of a certain era. I believe she has passed away. I don't know. She is a Hugo. This is the Hugo-nominated author. Novel by the author of Raising Stones, and it was written in publishing history of all the way back in 1989, which never seems that old to me since I graduated in 1986, so very long ago. The second book was Intangible Ink by Brian Aldiss, which it's actually a collection of short stories. So that might be another reason why it's kind of wearing its science fiction. The ideas right on its thing. It doesn't have the space to kind of bury it more in subtext, and also being of a certain era. This collection is Printing History Faber and Faber edition, published in 1969. So a year after I was born, as we're going along with the John history. And finally we have Little Big by John Crowley, which is one of these books that I've carried around for a long time. It's a big book. And I've heard lots of things. It's winner of the World Fantasy Award, and a ambitious, dazzling, strangely moving, marvelous, magic realistic family chronicle. Sensual and exuberant, wise and witty, here is John Crowley's World Fantasy Award-winning masterpiece. This is the saga of the remarkable Drinkwater family, the sparkling inhabitants of Edgewood, and the ever-changing house that sits on the border between what we know is real and what we always hoped is real. So, yes, that's probably my first pick for what I would read of the three. So, yeah, I'd say, yeah, Grass I will definitely get to at some point. Tepper, it sounds like a really interesting feminist science fiction author, which is something that sorely needed in these days. Yeah, so that's the page 112 thing, and it kind of gives me a little bit of clarity on these books, and it's my apology to Shawn for so abusing his form in my last video. And with that, more videos later. Bye for now.